guys, my name is Briana, and today I want to talk about validation. What is validation? What is validation of self? One definition, validation is the action of checking or proving the validity or accuracy of something. Okay? That's more of the technical definition. And another definition is recognition or affirmation of a person that their feelings or opinions are valid or worthwhile. Now I want to differentiate between internal versus external. So internal validation is basically you are validating yourself. You know yourself, you feel worthy about yourself, you feel valid, you basically, you have self-love. This feeling of worth only depends on you and yourself, and nobody else has an effect on whether or not you feel worthy or valid. Nobody else, or nothing else, I should say. I notice a lot of people validate externally. So basically they put their validity or their worthiness in the hands of other people or society, basically. So let's say, for example, that they externally validate with relationships. And so if, one person leaves them, they will most likely try to get into a relationship, really soon after to fill that void that, they need somebody to feel valid. Basically, they feel like if they don't have a significant other, then, they don't feel worthy. This could also be with physical appearance. If you don't look a certain way or don't feel like you're upholding society standards, then you just don't feel worthy, or if you're not getting attention from people, if you're not getting enough likes on social media, for example, or you're not, people aren't talking, you go out at night trying to pick somebody up and, nobody comes over and talks to you, so, you don't feel worthy. And so a lot of times, because of the lack of internal validation, people often try to fill that void externally, and that's what that is. And so it could be even with not just relationships, or, appearance type stuff, but it can also be with, things, objects, like buying stuff, shopping, even the number of friends on social media, for example. It can be the newest car or the newest phone or, brand name clothes and stuff. Not to say that all people that do that stuff don't have internal validation, but a lot of times the ones that don't have internal validation, they use those things to try to make themselves look better or feel better. And that's basically filling that void of internal validation that they are lacking. And so why do we get this lack or void of internal validation? Well, most people that have this grow up in situations where it becomes subconsciously programmed, through basically having that as a role model, like their parents or people they grew up with do that. And so that's how they see that their guardians are validating themselves. And so that's where they pick it up. Or they directly sort of have it programmed into them where some kind of trauma or wound happens, emotional wound happens. For example, a family member, such as a parent or grandparent, picks one of the kids, picks their sibling to be the favorite. And so they're treated way better than you are. They get everything they want. They get, the bigger room. They get all that stuff. And as a kid, you don't understand that, one, it has nothing to do with your worth, and two, that, that person, most likely that guardian, is dealing with their own issues, own emotional trauma, own emotional scars that they have yet to heal, and that they don't really mean to do that. deep down. But as a kid, you don't understand that. And so you just feel like unworthy. You just feel, oh, like they must not love me as much, or, I must not be as good enough, basically. And so you begin to hinge your worthiness on other people, like what other people think of you. And it could have been direct as well. It could have been somebody telling you, you're not good enough and you never get it right and you don't do this right and blah, blah, blah. That also will put in, program subconsciously, your subconscious basically, to find external validation rather than internal. So that's how we sort of come to need external validation. We're never taught to get it internally, basically. And usually it happens, from childhood, but it can also happen as an adult if, let's say, you maybe didn't learn to get your worth internally, but it wasn't like directly affecting you, or, as though you perceived it wasn't directly affecting you. And then let's say you get into, an abusive relationship or a codependent relationship, and so then it will start to reprogram your subconscious programming or add to it, to the negative subconscious programming, that you are unworthy. Like, let's say, for example, the significant other is constantly telling you you're worthless and blah, 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 and like not calling you back and not, and just like leaving and not communicating with you and doing all these things that are, unhealthy. And so you will start, you may start to like rely on that as sort of the meter for your self-worth. You kind of get programmed that. And there can also be other situations that can affect you. Most likely though, if you grew up with learning to internally validate, then chances are you probably wouldn't be getting into, codependent relationships and stuff like that. You would probably notice red flags immediately and things like that if, it was some kind of codependent relationship or whatever. However, things can happen as an adult that can basically trigger that, or, reprogram your subconscious negatively. So that could include, situations that are kind of like forceful or, like torture or, things that you really can't get out of. And so if you can't get out of those situations and you don't have a strong sense of self-validation, then they may affect you as an adult and then create more that's negative subconscious programming, and then your feelings of validity will go down even, or your need for external validation will increase, basically. Through all that subconscious programming and conditioning, we're not ever allowed to get in touch with who we really are, and like that we're okay with who we really are, and feel valid just as we are. We sort of lose touch of who we really are because we have such a fragile sense of self-worth that we place it in the hands of all these external things. The problem, though, is that when you feel the validation or the void externally, it is totally temporary. So if you're constantly relying on, if you look a certain way and suddenly, you don't look that way anymore, or let's say you rely on, relationships and you constantly need to have relationships, or you rely on the amount of friends you have and suddenly you don't have any friends, then basically the world around you will just collapse and shatter. Because it's so dependent on this external stuff that your inner validation it's like a shaky, it's super not solid. And so you can be easily tipped off balance. Here's a good example. So let's think of a plant, okay? It could be any plant, like a tree. And you're the plant, okay? And you are not fed all the things that you need. You're not fed all the sunlight and the water that you need and the air and all that stuff. And so you're going to be kind of weak. You're going to be like a weakling, a weak tree. And when the wind blows or something, comes along externally, you're going to topple over pretty easily, or you're going to break or snap, and you're just not going to be able to hold up. But if you are being fed with all the water and the sunlight and air and nutrients that you need, you're going to grow a really strong base. And if something comes along externally, basically you're going to be able to withstand that a lot more solidly because of your own internal sense of self-worth. It's kind of a muscle. You have to feed it daily, and you basically create a strong internal base of your validation and your self-worth. And so that when something comes along, like people, saying negative things about you, or, leaving negative comments, or, calling you something, that's negative, then you're going to maintain your sense of self-worth. It's not going, you're not going to be just tipped off balance just by, stuff like that. So that's kind of a good way to look at it. You're kind of feeding your internal validation. And so then your need for external validating will diminish. Basically, that's validation. That's external and internal validation. I'm going to be doing another video on how to validate internally. So if you want to get that video, subscribe. And I appreciate you watching, and hopefully you got something good out of it. And if you have any questions, let me know in the comments. And yeah, thank you so much.